chapter 16, section 3. So Jesus had promised that he would return one of these days and set up God's kingdom. And many Christians believed the time was near. But in the meantime, they would gather in small groups called churches. And they shared possessions. They led worship services in their homes and outside of their homes. And each church was in charge of itself. And the apostles, the people Jesus chose to teach his gospel to, would visit these different churches. And they would teach them and give them advice about issues. They also helped to tie all the churches together some. And as time goes on, people start to realize that maybe Jesus wasn't coming back as soon as they had thought. And they look for ways to hold the church together. And so they begin organizing the churches. And by 300 AD, here's kind of the organization you're going to see. Each church was a parish. Okay? And the leader of a church, or the leader of the parish, was a priest. And the parishes grouped together were a diocese. And so the head of each diocese would be a bishop. Now, the most important bishops were going to be called the archbishops. And they were in charge of the churches like in the larger cities. And the 5 leading archbishops were going to be called patriarchs. As time progresses, the archbishop in Rome claims to be the head of the church. And by 600 AD, he's going to be called the Pope, which comes from the Latin word for father. Latin-speaking Christians saw the Pope as the head of the churches. The Greek-speaking Christians don't necessarily accept him as leader. They follow the archbishop in Constantinople. In 1054, the two groups are going to separate. The Latin churches are going to be called the Roman Catholic Church, and the Greek culture churches are going to be called the Eastern Orthodox Church. Now, while the church was doing all of this organizing, they had to decide what writings to accept. And the writings would be put into the New Testament, the Christian scriptures. And the thing is, Jesus had not written down any of his teachings. Others had recorded his life and his teachings. By the end of the 300s AD, 4 writings were accepted as part of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These were 4 of Jesus's earliest followers, and they had wrote about his life and his teachings. You're also going to have writings by Paul and some other disciples that will also be accepted into the New Testament as well. And bishops are going to meet to discuss Christian thinking and policies. And the decisions that were made about Christian thinking and the policies of the Christian faith are going to be the official doctrine or statements of faith. And policies that went against this doctrine or false doctrines were called heresy. The fathers of the church were these scholars who wrote works that influenced Christians. And you're going to see these fathers of the church writing between 100 and 500 AD. And let me give you some of the big names. Jerome. One of the big things he's going to do is he's going to translate the Old and New Testament into Latin, because the New Testament, a lot of the early stuff was written in Greek. His translation is going to be called the Vulgate. And this will be the official Bible of the Roman Catholic Church. Another father of the church is going to be Augustine. Augustine was best known for his work called The City of God. And it defended Christianity. It defended it against people who said Christianity caused Rome to fall. He said Rome fell because it was too rich, it was corrupt, and it persecuted Christians. Now, during the early years of Christianity, thousands are going to leave the cities to live and pray alone. They're going to be hermits. These people that lived in these isolated places away from other people. They believed that it would help them grow closer to God without all those other distractions. But by the time you get to the late 300s, Basil is going to suggest another way of life. He said hermits, you're right, they're avoiding temptation, but they're doing nothing to improve the world. They're just hiding. And he suggested that Christians need to form religious settlements near the cities where they can be protected from temptation, but they can also be good examples and do good deeds. And this is where you're going to start getting the idea of monks. These men who lived in these religious communities. The monasteries are the places where monks lived. And if you were a female, you could be a nun. Women who belonged to religious order, nuns. And the nuns lived in convents. And Basil is going to make a list of rules for monks and nuns. It's going to be called the Basilian Rule. And it becomes a model for Eastern Orthodox religious life. Okay, and remember, Eastern Orthodox, these were the Christians who didn't follow Rome. They were on the other side of this former empire. In the West, in the Roman Catholic side, in the West, you're going to see the Benedictine rule, written by Benedict. Some of the rules for the Benedictine monks, they gave up all of their possessions. They wore simple clothes. They only ate certain foods. Benedictine monks don't marry. They had to obey the abbot, which was the leader of the monastery, without question. They would attend religious services 7 times during the day and then once at midnight. They worked 6 or 7 hours per day in the fields of the monastery. As they got older, they would do more clerical work or become carpenters or weavers. And by the time you get to 800, monks are going to play an important role in spreading Christianity in the empire, the former empire, in Europe. They preserved old Roman and Greek writings. The monks spent hours and hours each day copying ancient manuscripts to preserve them.